Today we mix a concoction. I have an unusual allergy. And we finally complete our kitchen. How's it, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Greg, and before we get into this finale of our rustic kitchen renovation, here's a quick introduction to everyone involved in making this project possible, and a special thanks to them from me. The first step was to get all the wiring connected for the lights. And of course, I was already being pedantic with the wiring layout.
Wow, you ask really hard questions.
So while Jamil wreaked havoc on the ceiling, I cut some LED channels from aluminium and not aluminum.
Oh, potato, tomato, potato, tomato.
After securing the channel to the wall unit, Jamil came into a bit of a problem. He pointed out that there was a beam in the way, so he had to drill next to it and would repair the hole later on. Kurt then heat shrunk the wiring to the LED connectors so that the positive wire was touching at least one of the left connections and the neutral wire was touching at least one of the right connections. This is because the LEDs are white only and not RGB.
There you go. You can put a donkey on that.
The walls are skew, but it's fine.
Dude, all walls are skew.
While Kurt is holding the cupboard in place, I'm trying to...
Didn't mean to photobomb you, sorry about that.
As I was saying, I'm trying to mark the holes on the wall as quick as possible for drilling. Now that the wall units with the LEDs are up, we put a pendant light in the window. I'm allergic to Jack Russells that don't shut up. Can you see which colors which? What was nice about this light is not only does it complement the rustic theme, but we found similar lights for the dining room and decided to put another one of these ball lights in the lounge.
nice light.
The next step was to not only transport these heavy cupboards, but to mount the legs, on which would have been impossible to do while laying them horizontally and tilting them afterwards, because the weight of the cupboard would have broken the legs and the height of the cupboards would have ended up hitting into the ceiling if the legs were attached.
Whoa, this is heavy.
So instead, I came up with a cheap and nasty solution of stacking enough bricks on top of each other, and Quentin would then balance the cupboard while I screw the legs in.
You got this, right?
You might think there's nothing to it, but from watching the time-lapse you can see how much balancing was required, especially while I was exerting force to secure the legs. What a legend.
Yeah!
When I removed this brick, I should have moved just in case the cupboard fell on top of me, but I'm glad Quentin had my back, and my head, and pretty much all of me. Now we just had to do the same for the cupboard that will be used for the dishwasher and tumble dryer. This part of the project didn't seem to ever end, so besides doing some basic electric work,
Positive to the negative to the positive. There.
I'll skip through hours of work where I secured boards against the broom cupboard and the machine cupboard to act as supports for a counter, drilled holes for the dishwasher's water inlet and outlet, and my attempt to put a flip counter using cabinet hinges when I realized that the counter wouldn't lift because of the cupboard in the way, so I moved the hinges to the sink unit, but this also didn't work because the counter was too thick.
There has been a right nose.
Oh, and while this was all going on, a typical washing day looked something like this. Before I say anything, you're probably wondering, why didn't I just cut the sheet on the ground? Surely it would have been easier. Well, you are right for thinking so, but for a tall person I was getting tired of working on the ground and wanted to prove that this would be easier. I soon realized that this was ending up to be more time consuming, so next time I would just cut the big sheets on the floor. I had to at least try this once because I would never know otherwise. And besides all the stupid ideas I come up with, some of them actually turn out to be quite good. This, however, was definitely not a good idea. Oh my word. What do I do? The weight of the board that was hanging off the edge of the table was causing it to tilt, and that caused my saw to jam up. So I had to initiate another boermakaplan, even though I'm English, so I could finish the cut without the board flying off. So I had to now balance this with some tiles so that doesn't fall off. So after being traumatized from this as well as the flip counter debacle, I had to redeem myself by tackling the most complicated H-shaped countertop that will fit in the window between the kitchen and the dining room. I plotted out my measurements on the 16mm MDF, which after being cut could be traced onto 16mm chipboard later. I left extra material in case of errors on this intricate piece, especially because the window I cut was not square. Once these two pieces were cut, I joined them together with wood glue and clamps to achieve a total thickness of 32mm. And also, just to give a quick FYI, I used this technique of plunging my track saw into the workpiece in a previous video and must say that the results are very satisfying. Even though I have a jigsaw now, I still prefer this method to get accurate cuts.
Vindication!
But before gluing these countertops together, I needed to cut the sink unit on these large adjoining pieces, and because this was the first time using the gizmo to cut circles with my router, well, I'll say no more. It turns out my mask made me sound like a Yeti.
Almost. It was more like...
I then continued to cut outside where there were no obstructions and then used polyfiller to patch up the unwanted grooves. I also broke out my jigsaw to cut out two smaller circles for counter bin lids in the corner unit where I had my incident with manure. Now it's time to use this grinding wheel to carve random shapes into the edges for a rough rock appearance. I got this idea from Stone Coat Countertops, so be sure to check out their channel as well. Before I got into any prep work for the counters, I quickly did a small test on an offcut to see how the colors would appear together. This will be an exotic or dirty pour as it's called, where I will mix several colors separately and then combine them into one container, making sure that they don't mix. I'll then dump out these colors in a random pattern and maybe add a few veins or blobs of a certain color and meld them in. And to give a nice dispersing effect, I lightly sprayed with some isopropyl alcohol. With the small scale test complete, it all seems straightforward.
Hi. Don't laugh.
Despite the equipment malfunction, I stuck the counters down in the main part of the kitchen first, with the larger pieces glued in two parts due to their weight. But the scullery counters, I poured the epoxy first and stuck them later in place. This allowed me to play with a technique that you will see later. Instead of bolting the microwave cupboard in, I chose to silicone the gaps between it and the counter and let the epoxy hold it in place.
Don't panic! Don't panic! Right, don't panic, you're all right. I'm in charge now, I'm in charge now. Now don't panic.
Thanks to the scale used, we could only mix half the epoxy and meld the extra colors first, then rush to do the same for the second mixture before it cured completely. Not to mention that we almost glued ourselves to the floor a few times. A combination of not buying enough epoxy and pulling the tape too soon out of panic made the edges lighter. So after waiting a while, we tried scraping some epoxy on the floor to fix it, but this didn't make the pattern perfect. We're just doing our best now. After this layer cured, I scuffed it up by hand with the 240 grit sandpaper and wiped the dust with a microfiber towel before applying a clear coat. And while the clear coat is still wet, this will glue the frames for the counter bin lids permanently. I thought it would be a good idea to just show the highlights of the finishing touches prior to the before and after shots.